Coming up next on Insights on PBS Hawaii, Hawaii Perspectives, the Democratic presidential debate. Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Daryl Huff from Hawaii News Now. Earlier today, presidential hopefuls Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders went head-to-head in their quest to capture the Democratic nomination for the top office. While there were some spirited exchanges in the debate, it often covered familiar ground, this just 2 days after the New Hampshire primary in which Sanders easily beat Hillary Clinton. PBS NewsHour co-anchors Gwen Ifill and Judy Woodruff moderated the debate held at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. The debate, which took place today from 4 to 6 p.m. Hawaii time, was carried live on PBS Hawaii, and it will be re-aired in its entirety immediately following this program at 9 tonight. Now, joining us tonight in the PBS Hawaii studio in Manoa are representatives from Hawaii's Democratic and Republican parties, along with a political observer. They'll offer commentary, and they've agreed to answer questions from viewers. Yes, we'd like to hear from you during tonight's discussion. Call with your questions and comments about the debate. Phone 973-1000 if you're on Oahu, or 800-238-4847 if you're on a neighbor island. You can also watch Insights streamed live at pbshawaii.org. Just click on the title of tonight's show, or find us on Twitter at PBS Hawaii. Now to meet our guests for tonight's show, Leilani Lipton is the chair of the Communications Committee for the Democratic Party of Hawaii and represents Kailua, Waimanalo, and Hawaii Kai for the organization. Ms. Lipton is a member of the Kailua Neighborhood Board. She worked as a volunteer on President Obama's campaign in 2008. Ethan Oki is the statewide president for the Young Democrats of Hawaii, an organization aimed at encouraging young people to get involved in the political process. Young Democrats of Hawaii is an official affiliate of the Young Democrats of America and the Hawaii Democratic Party. Mr. Oki is also a member of the Nu'uanu Neighborhood Board. Colin Moore is an assistant professor of political science at the University of Hawaii at Manoa and also serves as the director of the UH Public Policy Center. Dr. Moore scrutinizes elections from a policy perspective and has been a political commentator for a number of local news organizations. And chosen by the Hawaii Republican Party to represent it tonight, former U.S. Congressman from Hawaii, Charles Deschutes. He served in the U.S. House from 2010 to 2012. Mr. Deschutes, an attorney with a practice in business law and an Army Reserve officer who served in a legal capacity in Afghanistan. He was also a member of the Honolulu City Council and the Hawaii State House of Representatives, where he was minority floor leader. PBS NewsHour, by the way, also did offer the Republican National Committee a presidential debate forum, but it has not received a response at this time, and Insights will bring you further coverage of the presidential race at a future time this election season. First of all, let me start. I think this has been a pretty surprising campaign in a lot of ways. Colin Moore, what has been the most surprising thing to you? Say, looking back a year, did you expect we'd be here?
Absolutely not. Look, we have a Democratic socialist who now just won a primary in New Hampshire. I mean, Bernie Sanders has been around a long time. I think people sort of thought he was the batty uncle. And he's had tremendous success. No one would have ever predicted this, I don't think. And I think you see a similar phenomenon on the Republican side as well.
Ethan Oki, as a young Democrat representing Young Democrats, how do you explain what's going on with Bernie Sanders, and is it happening in Hawaii too?
Oh, it's big. On our neighbor islands, we have a big push for Bernie. Here on Oahu, we have the college, and millennials are definitely coming out now to participate in this election. And he's definitely getting the momentum going for us.
Leilani Lipton, representing the party, did you folks expect that you're going to have this much of a contest at this stage? It seemed like Hillary Clinton had it all wrapped up a while ago.
You know, I think having debates like this one that are engaging and thoughtful dialogue about the future of our country is very important. I think you're seeing a lot of energy with this campaign. You're seeing a lot of different constituent groups coming out. And it's just really exciting. It's very much about substance and content and experience. And I don't think it's based on entertainment value. And so we're really excited. I think it's going to be a great campaign season.
Charles, as you, I mean, how do you feel about this? I mean, people are really talking early about this.
I mean, I think it's a good thing that you see a lot of back and forth and exchange of ideas between Senator Sanders and Secretary Clinton. For me, however, I think the most surprising aspect on the Democratic side is how far it's swung to the left and how quickly it's been a debate about not moderate versus liberal, but who can be the furthest to the left. I think the Democratic Party has had a rich and good positive tradition of having a lot of moderate Democrats in the race. In this particular race in 2016, though, the one moderate candidate, former Senator Jim Webb of Virginia, barely got any traction at all, dropped out very quickly. I was very surprised that I found that other sort of mainstream Democratic candidates, such as former Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley or former Rhode Island Governor Lincoln Chafee, also got very, very little traction. And instead, this campaign has been just liberal and more liberal, which is very different, I think, in previous Democratic campaigns.
Colin Moore, you know, I think it was Richard Nixon that always says you run one direction in the primary and the other direction. Is that what do you think we're seeing here?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, the fact that Sanders has been so successful has pushed Hillary to the left. And I don't think that was necessarily something she wanted to do in the primary because it's going to make it a bit harder in the general. But obviously, the Democratic base, particularly young people, support this very liberal candidate who we haven't seen in a long time. Charles is exactly right. You usually see moderate candidates running in the Democratic primaries. So this makes it difficult for her to figure out how she's going to manage her general election campaign because she has this fight from her left, and she might now have to take positions in these debates, and I think we'll talk about that tonight, that might make it a little more difficult for her in the general.
And there's no moderate voice, which I'm very surprised by. I mean, in every previous election, there's always been at least one serious mainstream candidate in the Democratic primaries who sort of represents the center, the political center. Whether it was John Edwards tried to do that in the previous election, you've had, of course, Jim Webb tried to do it in this particular election. But it's gone. It's completely disappeared, and I think that's disappointing.
Let me ask Livani, I think that what Charles Azu is saying is that you couldn't call Hillary Clinton a moderate, but I think that a lot of people would say that she is a moderate.
Yes, I believe that she is a moderate, and I think, you know, she's trying to raise up issues over a broad sector of our society that are really important. Issues like healthcare in Hawaii, how are we gonna care for our kupuna? How are we gonna plan long-term for them? Issues like education, how are we gonna take care of our keiki? What about early learning? Issues like the environment and climate change and women's rights, reproductive rights. So I believe that she's a moderate, but she's also, you know, she's got a lot of different issues, both her and Sanders do. And what's great about this is that they're having very healthy discussions that are elevating the importance and the dialogue that we're seeing locally in our communities.
Ethan, how do you see the young Democrats in particular falling on this? Are you seeing people change their minds? Are you seeing women who were steadfast for Clinton moving to Sanders? What are you seeing? A lot of mix, a lot of uncertainty?
Actually, the quite opposite. I think people within the Democratic Party are really getting a part of their particular candidate that they start from the beginning. If it was a Bernie person, they're stronghold. They're, you know, Bernie this, Bernie that. When it comes to Hillary, you know, we have young Democrats who are Hillary fans, and you know, they support whether they're, you know, LGBT, whether they're female, whether they're male. It really doesn't matter. It's really, I kind of want to disagree that there's a moderate and liberal. I think Hillary is that moderate person, yet it really allows us to see the dynamic within our party, and you know, it's something for.
Call it a chance, because sorry. Go ahead, finish your thought.
Yeah, and basically it just allows us to see the breadth even within our Hawaiian Democrats.
Colin, two things. One is the labels that are applied. Do you agree with what Congressman DeJoux is saying about that? We got two liberals running in the Democratic Party. Is that a fair set of labeling?
Well, I'm not sure I would go so far as to call Hillary a liberal. I mean, she's more of an establishment candidate, which has been a real liability for her in this election. But she is more liberal than the other early Democratic primary candidates. That's absolutely true. I mean, I'd say she's kind of dead center in the Democratic Party. She's, I think, more liberal than her husband was, President Bill Clinton. And so you do have sort of center-left and then left-left.
You know, I think the comment I was going to make here is, you know, Bernie Sanders has said on numerous occasions, you can be a progressive, you can be a moderate, but you can't be both. Either you're a progressive or you're a moderate. And Bernie Sanders has taken off on this campaign because he has made it very clear to the public that he is not confused with what he is. He is unabashedly and has repeatedly described himself as a democratic socialist. He proudly wears the liberal label. He calls himself progressive, and he thoroughly rejects the label moderate. The difficulty, I think, and one of the reasons why Hillary Clinton has hit turbulence is she's trying to thread this needle of calling herself moderate but still liberal, calling herself mainstream but also trying to be progressive. And because of that here, she's not getting the traction that I think a lot of people thought she would have. I mean, at the starting gate, 10 months ago, she was the prohibitive favorite in this particular race. But Bernie Sanders, this 74-year-old rumpled U.S. Senator from Vermont with a clear, unabashed, unapologetic message, has really taken over the campaign.
Levani, let me give you a chance to respond to that. Do you think that this is bad for the Democratic Party? Do you think this looks bad and will hurt them ultimately in a general election?
You know, I don't think so. I still believe, on behalf of the party, that we have two very high-quality Democrats who are running for office. And I really think at the end of the day, it's not about the labels. It is about the issues, and it is about the people. It is about the electorate. It is about U.S. citizens who are, going to vote in the next president, the 45th president of this country. And so I think when you ask people what matters to them, they're going to say, having a job matters to me. Making sure I have medical care matters to me. Making sure that my child can go to preschool matters to me. So I really think, you can go on and on with the political pundits about labeling, but I think what matters at the end of the day is the issues and how each of these candidates is going to represent us in the issues that matter to us.
Colin, I'd like to ask you, since we've given Charles, as you, this platform to blast away at the Democrats. I'm wondering.
And believe me, Daryl, I'm enjoying it.
I know, I can tell. Colin, I mean, just what's your observation in light of what, Charles, you just said about the Democrats, about what's going on with the Republicans?
Well, I mean, that is actually the more interesting primary. I mean, honestly, who would have thought that Donald Trump was going to be the front runner? I mean, I don't even think Donald Trump himself thought that. I think he started this maybe as a publicity stunt. But you see the same thing going on in both campaigns in some ways, which is that on the hard right and on the far left, you have candidates who are unapologetic about their very extreme ideological positions. This seems to resonate with the voters because both Trump and Sanders seem genuine to voters. And I think that's one thing that you really see them picking up in this campaign, right? Trump is never afraid to say anything, I mean, no matter how offensive. And Sanders will lay out a variety of extremely liberal policies that we really haven't seen in this country championed by a national level candidate since the Great Society.
Ethan, I'd be curious your thoughts about when you see the two candidates duking it out like this. Do you worry, or the fun thing is you can really tell where they stand, right?
Yes. And depending on what we're talking about, if we're talking about the Democratic debate, then yeah, you can see the Bernie and you can see the Hillary factions coming together and then debating on the issues. When you watch the Republicans, on the other hand, it's just reality TV gone bad, right? I mean, a political reality TV is unfolding in front of us for the Republican presidential debate. Yet, for the Democrats, I mean, it's logical, it's very on the point, it's issue-based. If you were to write down every issue that they talked about tonight, you'd run out of paper. I mean, like, every issue was discussed. And it was really a back and forth of positions, how you voted, and whatnot. And I think it's exciting. It's definitely exciting for our young
One quick response to that, then we're going to have a couple clips.
Well, no, actually, let me begin by saying here that I think what's going on in my political party is crazy. I've never seen a political election like this, how it is unfolding. But if anything here, I mean, the heat, the interest, the momentum is right now on the Republican side. But let me pick up on something that Colin was saying here, that I do believe that after 7 years of Obama, the American people are frustrated. They're disappointed in politics. And that's why you see the far left and the far right being so successful, because they're thoroughly rejecting the mainstream of American politics. And I think the Democrats actually have a remarkable opportunity, with so much disappointment over what's happened over the last 7 years in the Obama administration, to still win this election, because the Republican Party is in disarray. But they're left with a far left candidate in Bernie Sanders, and then a candidate with a lot of baggage and a lot of problems who might get criminally indicted in Hillary Clinton.
Okay.
And I think that's a problem.
Okay, so on that note, let's go to our first clip now. Clearly, both Clinton and Sanders' main tactic tonight was to cast doubt on each other's main themes. Clinton says Sanders' many promises will be difficult to pay for.
I will not throw us further into debt. I believe I can get the money that I need by taxing the wealthy, by closing loopholes, the things that we are way overdue for doing. And I think once I'm in the White House, we will have enough political capital to be able to do that. But I am conscious of the fact that we have to also be very clear, especially with young people, about what kind of government is going to do what for them and what it will cost.
And let us be clear that every proposal that I have introduced has been paid for. For example, all right, who in America denies that we have an infrastructure that's crumbling? Roads, bridges, water systems, wastewater plants? Who denies that? Who denies that real unemployment today, including those who have given up looking for work and are working part-time, is close to 10%? Who denies that African-American youth unemployment, real, is over 50%? We need to create jobs. So yes, I will do away with the outrageous loopholes.
Ethan, okay, let me toss this one to you first. You know, basically we heard both candidates say they're going to tax the rich more. Is that popular among Democrats, and do you think that's a kind of a scary position to take? In Hawaii, how do you think that plays?
Well, as far as young Democrats, I mean, young Democrats, they're not the billionaires, they're not the millionaires. So we're excited because the way we see it is we're paying less taxes. Where that money gets distributed, that's the exciting point. Where is that going to go? Universal health care, free tuition for colleges. I mean, that's exciting news for us. And even more so, that's a talking point. It's not something that maybe we'll do it. This is a fundamental platform that both candidates are talking about. So again, it's going to be good.
Colin, do you think that given Hawaii's demographic, do you think, I mean, ultimately Hawaii may not have a whole lot to say who becomes president, sorry, you know, but it's a lot of fun to talk about, and, you know, and we all want to vote, we want to do our patriotic best, but really, say we're going to tax the rich in Hawaii, often that the rich are not really rich.
Well, that's right. I mean, we have a relatively middle-class state still. Our rich people are not nearly as rich as the folks in California or New York. So I think that, I mean, I think that Sanders' message resonates, although I think likely Hillary will be the favored candidate here. I mean, because she's more mainstream, because our Democratic Party is a pretty mainstream Democratic Party, I think. But there is here, I mean, you can think about the frustrations about the cost of living. I mean, this really is something that people here are deeply concerned about. And Sanders' message may resonate with them because of that. I mean, I know my students, most of them favor Bernie Sanders. They like his positions on college education, on student loans, all of these things that really hit local folks very hard. Sanders speaks directly to that. And it's easier for him because he has that one message, and you can see him hammer it again and again in this debate. It's more difficult for Hillary Clinton to always say, yes, but it's complicated.
Charles?
Well, you know, Daryl, it's always easy to be Santa Claus. It's always easy to promise the world, give everything away, and then just say rich people are going to pay for it all. I mean, that's the easy thing to do. It's a lot harder to be somber and serious and consider the impact of your policies and what they all are going to do. I think for the people in Hawaii, would you understand of what both Clinton and Sanders are talking about here, suddenly jacking up tax rates astronomically on the so-called rich? The #1 sector in Hawaii's economy is tourism. Tourism is directly dependent upon disposable income, primarily disposable income of the wealthier sector of our country. Taxing the rich is going to have a direct impact on the people of Hawaii because it's going to impact the bottom line of tourism and the tourism economy. It's going to hurt Hawaii.
Luani, what do you think?
Yeah, I wanted to comment to your earlier comment about even though the vote doesn't count much for Hawaii, because it does. It does count, and it is important that our voices are heard, and who we vote for is, a direct endorsement of who we feel will represent us best. So I definitely want to share that with the voters of Hawaii. We typically have a low voter turnout rate. Please come out and vote. I also wanted to say, regarding infrastructure and paying for things, we still have to pay for things that are very important. We still have to have Medicare. We still have to be able to have our Social Security. These things are really important. We're working for equal pay for women and paid family leave. So that money has to come from somewhere. And tuition, that's also very big, as Senator Sanders has implied in his campaign. So definitely voters get out there and vote, and it does matter. Your voice counts.
Okay, let me ask, though, Levani, a little bit about the process that we're going to go through in Hawaii to choose between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton. Who will be involved in that process, and when will it happen, and what's the process?
So we have something here locally called the Presidential Preference Poll. Our presidential preference poll is taking place on March 26th at 1 p.m. This is run by the party, and it's run at the county level. So that is Hawaii County, Oahu County, Kauai County, and Maui County. And basically the purpose of the presidential preference poll is twofold. It's for local Democrats and members from our community to select who their preference is for president. And the second purpose of it is to elect delegates at the precinct level who will attend our local convention, which is May 28th and 29th, I believe. So we have a state convention of the Democratic Party of Hawaii. And then at that convention, you can run as a delegate to the national convention in Philadelphia in July. So it's really important. You have to be a registered voter, you have to be a registered Democrat, and you can do that online at www.hawaiidemocrats.org.
So let me get this process straight. So you've
Yes.
got this preference poll that elects delegates to the state convention, and then they elect delegates to the national convention.
Well, the presidential preference poll is the selection of who local Democrats want to be the preferred candidate for the Democratic Party. Then there's also the precinct election, which is local delegates from our community. I'm from Kailua. I attended mine. I became a delegate, and I was able to go to our Hawaii State Convention. Then, when we meet in May at the State Convention, we select 34 delegates to go on to the National Convention, which is in Philadelphia at the end of July.
And Elliot, Ethan, I'm sorry. Ethan, sorry. I always do that at least once per show. I got a question from a viewer. Please tell us who the superdelegates are. I don't mean to know, I know the congressional delegation, the top leadership. How many of the 34 delegates are superdelegates, or are the superdelegates on top of that?
To be honest, I don't think I have the definitive number as far as superdelegates. But I think the delegate number that we should be focused on is that 34 delegates that we're going to send to the National Convention in July, for the July convention. And again, March 26th is going to be a big day for Democrats. We're going to come together throughout the state and each county. Young Democrats are being mobilized as we speak to go to our precinct locations and get involved. And through the county conventions, to the state convention, and then possibly seeing either Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton become our Democratic candidate. I mean, it's an exciting time for young Dems.
Colin, you've studied this process, right? Can you help explain it? It seems very complicated, and Maybe I'm missing something, but it seems like a complicated process. And
it is a complicated process. So people can understandably be confused, and the Republicans run it a little differently than the Democrats. Democrats have superdelegates, and people can just think of superdelegates as party elites. That's the best way to think of them. I mean, these are officials in the party or elected politicians, and they sometimes commit their votes early, but they're not regular citizens.
And it also, as I understand, Hillary Clinton, one of her main tactics was to lock up as many superdelegates as she could at the front end.
That's right. I mean, that was actually a tactic she tried with President Obama, and that didn't work out for her last time. But that's a very strategic move, right? This is the Clinton name. People usually want to support the potential nominee, and it can look very daunting to a challenger. And so I think that was a sensible strategy. At this point, I think it's still going to be a strategy because I think most of the elites in the Democratic Party do think that Clinton is going to be the eventual nominee.
And many have committed to her already.
And many have committed to her already, exactly. So this makes it more difficult for Senator Sanders.
Charles Eugene, what do you think is going to be the outcome of that? I know you may not be an expert on that process, but historically Hawaii has tended to, except when Obama ran from Hawaii, tended to go with sort of the establishment, the Inouye pick generally, right?
Well, actually, Darrell, let me back up here. You were asking about, is this all confusing? Why do we do it this way? Let me begin by just saying, I don't think anybody would design the system intentionally this way, with Iowa first and New Hampshire second.
Well, the whole
and
system.
This confusing system of how we do delegates, and then have the Democratic system and the Republican system different, and to just make it even more confusing here in the state of Hawaii, the Republican caucus and the Democratic presidential primary preference are on different days. Yeah. You know, we'll throw on another layer of confusion for everybody here. But no, I mean, one critical difference between the Republicans and the Democrats is the Republicans do not have superdelegates. On the Democratic side, I believe it's the members of the congressional delegation as well as the governor. They can vote for whoever they want for president. The Democrats originally instituted that as an effort to try and make more moderate members get elected. They were worried after Mondale and Dukakis that the party was swinging too far to the left. As a means to moderate the party, they instituted these superdelegates. But yet it is still interesting here. With that effort, I still think the party's still swinging to the left, despite the party's leadership's best efforts.
We'll go on to another clip now. This one, Clinton also attacked the math behind Sanders' single-payer health care proposal after he said each person would pay $500 more in taxes for $5,000 worth of health care benefits.
If you're having Medicare for all, single payer, you need to level with people about what they will have at the end of the process you are proposing. And based on every analysis that I can find by people who are sympathetic to the goal, the numbers don't add up. And many people will actually be worse off than they are right now.
If, and here's the if, we have the courage to take on the drug companies and have the courage to take on the insurance companies and the medical equipment suppliers. If we do that, yes, we can guarantee health care to all people in a much more cost-effective way.
More on that, you know, when it comes to the issue of health care, the single-payer proposal is very dramatic compared to even Hillary Clinton, who's stuck with the insurance companies are going to bid for the ability to and you're going to, it's coming out of your pocket and so on. Right. How do you think that plays, first in Hawaii and then across the country?
Well, I mean, certainly people find in part this very attractive. Obamacare has been a very confusing system. The entire American healthcare system is tremendously confusing and in some cases broken. But I think the Clinton response to this, and this has been her response throughout the debate, which is that it's not going to work. This is a nice idea. In theory, if we could roll back time, start everything over, and have a single-payer healthcare system, that might be great. But Senator Sanders is living in a fantasy world, is what she's trying to say. And that Obamacare is the best we could do. And of course, it's a Band-Aid. I mean, it's a patch in a very complex system. But it's never going to happen. And I think you hear her repeating that message again and again. It's too complex. And in Hawaii, it would be a difficult sell because we don't have a lot of people who are uninsured here. We never have since the 70s. And so I don't think that is going to be an issue that really resonates with our local voters.
Ethan, no, let me ask you, I mean, after the healthcare connector fell apart, and it made a lot of people feel that government wasn't particularly competent dealing with this issue. Do you think that people in Hawaii would enjoy having something as simple as you're just covered?
Yeah, I mean, to go off what Colin had mentioned, we're 90% covered. We're talking about the 10% of the problematic base that we have in Hawaii. You know, we're talking about homelessness. We're talking about, you know, crazy people. We're not talking about the average everyday person. Now with Obamacare, we can have young Democrats, or we can have just millennials in general, stay on their parents' coverage to 26, which allows them to go to college, to get a graduate level degree, and to then participate, covered medically. So, I mean, it is an exciting thing, and it does provide more than what we already had, but at the same time, we were good in Hawaii. So I think anything to increase or even solidify the programs we have in Hawaii, we'll definitely be supportive of.
Do you agree with that? Do you think people are satisfied with their medical coverage in Hawaii?
You know, I have a lot of experience in this, personal experience, and dealing with family members who have a lot of different doctors. And I think there's some dissatisfaction around insurance and you know, claims and doctors getting reimbursed. There was articles about HMSA and some of the fiascos lately. But what I think is really important is that Hawaii is known for having a healthy population and good quality of life. And I think that's something that's very important. I think it's one of the priorities of our party that we take care of each other and that we do have access to health care. And like Ethan said, we have 90% coverage. And this is where Clinton and Sanders differ. They agree that we should have medical care covered, but they differ in their approaches. And you know, I think the people of Hawaii want what will take care of us, what will best suit us. How do we get our families, our local families who are middle class, who are already struggling, many of whom work more than one job, many of whom live under one roof and have multi-generations living under that roof. How do we take care of each other? And don't forget, this issue it's about Hawaii, but it's also a national issue.
That's what I wanted to bring up for Charles. Let me ask you a question. You could add your own comment, but I want to make sure I don't forget this question. In a way, even though Bernie Sanders is announcing a single-payer system, he's actually using this as a way to attack big insurance, big pharma, big business, the big medical institutions. Do you think he's serious about this issue? And do you think that's going to hurt or help him if he becomes a nominee? People know about health care.
You know, Daryl, the refreshing thing about Bernie Sanders is that he means what he says, and he says what he means. The scary thing about Bernie Sanders is he says what he means, and he really means what he says.
I can think of someone else who people feel the same way about on your side.
Yes,
right? Yeah.
And I agree with you on that. But you know, this clip you just showed of Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton, I think in a lot of ways summarizes this Democratic race in a nutshell. Bernie Sanders has a very clear, simple, easy to understand message that we're going to give you health care free. We're going to give college education free. Hillary Clinton has a message, but hers is a much more difficult message. It's a much more analytical one, where she's trying to say, well, yes, I want that, but it's not realistic. Bernie Sanders is appealing to the heart of Democrats, and I think he has captured the heart and soul of the Democratic Party. The challenge and the question of this race is whether or not the heads are still going to go with Hillary Clinton in the long run, or their hearts are going to be with Bernie Sanders. But before I leave this subject, though, I also want to just respectfully point out, it is curious, Bernie Sanders does not mention single-payer health care plan has been tried in the United States in his home state of Vermont. They tried it, it was nice, but it completely blew up the Vermont state budget, and Vermont, after trying it for just a couple of years, reversed single-payer. And so while Bernie Sanders, what he's promising, I think sounds very, very nice. I have to admit, Hillary Clinton, I think her analytics are actually more accurate, and
Even
she's
though they're
telling the
harder to
truth. Yes.
understand,
It's just it's a harder message to get across to the electorate.
And I think if I can just jump off what Charles is saying, this you see in this debate what is kind of the essence of these candidates. Bernie Sanders is a radical. he's always been a radical. Hillary Clinton really is a policy wonk. She loves policy details. You can even see her, I think, trying to resist getting into the weeds in this debate. Obviously, her handlers have told her not to discuss these detailed policies. But I mean, she, of course, famously tried to create a national health care system when she was the First Lady. So I think you see this again and again in this debate, the radical versus the policy wonk.
You know, as I was mentioning when we were speaking to Charles Dejoux, this idea, though, that this is part of his overall theme of attacking the big industries and the wealthy billionaires and so on. A question from Melissa Honolulu: does anybody really think spreading the wealth really works? Levani, let me give you a shot at that. I mean, do we need to spread the wealth in this country?
Wow, that's a very good question. Thank you for that, Melissa. You know, I have to go back to the ideals that our country and that our party was founded on. And it is equality and freedom and equal opportunity and access. And I do believe that spreading the wealth is good. It is good. It shows a genuine concern for human beings. And this is something that I think our founding fathers would have really championed. It's important that we take care of each other and that we respect each other and that we recognize that while we may have differences, we're united as a nation.
You know, Ethan, with young Democrats, young people in particular facing big college debt and seeing the wealth disparity seeming to grow, do you think that spreading the wealth is not in any way a word for them, bad phrase?
Well, I mean, I don't know. For me, I personally believe that our geography dictates our political values. And the fact that a lot of young Democrats here in Hawaii, we live on islands. We are bred, we're raised, we are taught from a very young age to rely on each other. So providing equality is just standard of how we conduct business and how we think and how we provide for each other. It's not like if you're hungry and you come into my house, I won't feed you. It's just a standard of thing. So if someone has more and we're gonna pass it around so that everyone can provide, not to say that we're only gonna take care of the needy, but really everyone all together. Really, it's an exciting thing for Hawaii, as well as young Democrats, because this is gonna be our place, right?
Yeah, do you think that spreading the wealth is something that will work against a candidate if it's brought up on a national level?
Well, I think it's working very well for Senator Sanders.
Well, that's within the Democratic Party,
no,
right?
But I think it's an important point here to what Levani and Ethan are mentioning here. In the debate, I think one of the most effective attack lines that Bernie Sanders used, and has repeatedly used, is to hit and pound Hillary Clinton again and again and again on her connections to Wall Street. The millionaires and billionaires, as he calls it, over on Wall Street. And that Hillary Clinton taking a speech for nearly $700,000 from Goldman Sachs and then not knowing how she got $700,000 in her bank account, raising tens of millions of dollars from the so-called upper crust of New York. It is working for Senator Sanders. I think there is a clear frustration in the Democratic Party itself that Hillary Clinton has wedded herself so tightly with the super elite and the super rich.
Thank you for setting up this next clip so nicely, which is exactly about Sanders' frequent criticism of Hillary Clinton for her support from Wall Street and having a super PAC. He again forced her to defend that tonight.
If you had a super PAC like President Obama had, which now says it wants to support me, it's not my PAC. If you take donations from Wall Street, you can't be independent. I would just say I debated then Senator Obama numerous times on stages like this. And he was the recipient of the largest number of Wall Street donations of anybody running on the Democratic side ever. Now, when it mattered, he stood up and took on Wall Street. He pushed through and he passed the Dodd-Frank regulations, the toughest regulations since the 1930s. So let's not in any way imply here that either President Obama or myself would in any way not take on any vested interest, whether it's Wall Street or drug companies or insurance companies or, frankly, the gun lobby, to stand up to do what's best for the American people.
Well, let's not insult the intelligence of the American people. People aren't dumb. Why in God's name does Wall Street make huge campaign contributions? I guess just for the fun of it. They want to throw money around. Why does the pharmaceutical industry make huge campaign contributions? Any connection, maybe, to the fact that our people pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs? Why does the fossil fuel industry spend huge amounts of money on campaign contributions? Any connection to the fact that not one Republican candidate for president thinks and agrees with the scientific community that climate change is real?
Colin Moore, how much of a piece of baggage is Hillary Clinton's history with Wall Street and the banks and so on?
I think it's very damaging for her in the Democratic primary. I mean, this confirms what people already believe, which is that she's a creature of the establishment, that she's been good on some issues, but she's never been particularly good on issues of economic inequality. And hammering this home, saying Wall Street, the millionaires and billionaires, this has always been Sanders' line, and it really resonates with voters. I mean, even on the Republican side, Donald Trump's one of his claims to fame is that he's financing largely his own campaign. He isn't beholden to these special interests. And it does matter. I mean, we have to be careful when we think about this, and there's been a fair bit of political science research on this. It's very rare in the United States that they're actually purchasing votes. That doesn't happen. And you heard, for those of the listeners who watched the debate, you heard Hillary Clinton say, well, I didn't change my vote because of any of this money I took. That's probably true. But what does this money buy? The money buys access. It means that the issues that folks in Wall Street care about, the issues that the pharmaceutical companies care about, their concerns are dealt with immediately, and other concerns, concerns of the poor, are not dealt with. So, I mean, this is a fair criticism by Senator Sanders.
Ethan, Oki, do you agree?
Oh, most definitely. I mean, money is even in Hawaii, as much as our races are not presidential level, you know, money does buy access. And it provides for people to have TV ads versus radio ads versus just postcards. But at the same time, you have to realize that this is a grassroots organization. Obama wasn't, I mean, he got billionaires and millionaires to donate, but at the same time, I even donated to him, $25 as a college student. When I got deployed, I stayed up to watch him become president because I donated. And something as small as $25, it empowered me. It empowered me to the point of getting involved, making sure I voted, and so on. So, yeah, the super PACs is a dirty word in a certain sense, but at the same time, there are everyday people a part of this too.
Levani, when people have come to you and said they don't like Hillary Clinton because of this, and I'm not suggesting you're a supporter one way or another of either of these candidates, but how would you defend her in that circumstance? I mean, is it difficult to defend?
You know, first of all, I have to reiterate, I'm here on behalf of the party.
Right.
And I wanted to just I wanted to add an extra comment to that, in addition to the grassroots efforts of voters, I also think that both Sanders and Clinton support campaign finance reform and transparency in government. I know that Clinton has stated numerous times that she will not be influenced. She will not allow her policies to be influenced by super PAC or by Wall Street money. And so people, they haven't come to me yet with their perspectives, but if they were to say, you know, offer a criticism, I would just say to really research the candidates and their platforms. Before I came here, I looked at both Sanders and Clinton's website. They both have issues up on their website. I believe that the research that they do in the coming weeks and months, it will become more extensive so that you'll see deeper proposals on how they actually plan to deal with some of these issues at a more detailed level. But to the average person and resident right here locally in Hawaii, do your research and vet the candidates, because that's your right to vote and you get to choose.
Let me ask Charles, as you. in a way, does this position of Bernie Sanders attacking Wall Street, does it actually play to the hands of people who say he'll actually damage the economy? Is that sort of a softball to the Republicans?
Well, perhaps. I mean, right now, I think Bernie Sanders just wants to win the Democratic primary, and I think that's what his focus is. And I think this is his best single instrument that he has against Hillary Clinton. And that's why he's pounding her on it again and again and again. And let me just say this, that I think there is a frustration both locally here in Hawaii as well as nationally, that politics is stacked against the average person, that the average voter out there does not and cannot influence their democracy because the big institutions out there dominate everything. Nationally, it is Wall Street. Locally here in Hawaii, it's the Old Boy Network. It's the public employee unions who seem to control everything. And the average person doesn't have a say. And I think there's that frustration we have here in Hawaii, and that's why it's so successful.
I have to give Ethan a chance to respond to that.
Yeah, I would have to definitely disagree with that. I mean, the Old Boy Network is, I mean, where are they? They're not, we have GMOs getting hit up every day by grassroots. We have anti-GMO. We have Mauna Kea. That's all grassroots efforts. And they're actually impacting government as we speak on a governor level. You know, not to say that one is better than the other, but you cannot say that. Yeah, it's just.
Okay, no, wait, I have to stop because I want to get some stuff in from our viewers here because they've been patiently calling in, and I've got several comments here. We promised we'd let them weigh in, so we've been going for a long time. Brian from Waipahu says Bernie Sanders has gone far to the left when it comes to European socialists by wanting to break up the big banks and raising corporate taxes. Amy from Kaneohe, I watched the Democratic debates and I think Bernie Sanders hit it right on the nose when it comes to millennials or what millennials are going through. They relate to him and not the old school approach of Hillary Clinton. Dig at Bernie Sanders now. Appearances on The Colbert Show, The View, and Saturday Night Live in less than a week. No wonder he seemed a bit tired at the onset of the debate. He still rocked it.
But he wasn't on Island Insights, you know?
Yeah.
He said, hey.
Yeah, he wants to come to a tough show? Get over here. Yeah. And finally, Hillary Clinton says she's going to fix everything in 2000. Said she was going to fix everything in 2008, but everything that was fixed was already fixed by the Democratic Party. I'm going to go to our last clip now, which is kind of a fun one. The debate finishing with a very spirited exchange after Clinton said Sanders had made personal attacks on President Obama.
I was a senator. I understand we can disagree on the path forward, but those kinds of personal assessments and charges are ones that I find particularly troubling.
You may respond to that, but it's time now for closing statements, and you can use your time for closing statements to do that.
One of us ran against Barack Obama. I was not that candidate.
A lot of commentators were waiting for him to say that. I want to give you a chance, Charles Dejoux, to respond to Faye from Mililani. Which candidate would the Republicans prefer to a battle in the general election?
Well, I think that depends. Is Hillary Clinton getting indicted or not?
Presuming no indictment, go ahead. What do you think?
Well, I don't know. That's a pretty big presumption, Daryl. I think from the GOP side, I think, for myself, I certainly don't care for Donald Trump. I think he's completely roiled the Republican presidential elections. He's not who I'm favoring. As many people know, I am chairing John Kasich's campaign for the presidency here in the state of Hawaii. I think he represents the sort of mature, somber adult leadership that I think our country desperately needs.
Let me ask you this, though. Do you think that were Trump to win the Republican primary, what kind of position would that put you in? Which Democrat would you prefer to vote for if you can't vote for Trump?
Michael Bloomberg.
It'll be an all-New York race. Sanders.
Interesting question here. Colin, this is sort of goes to the reality of running for president. And there are many people in this same boat as this fellow. Why did the media not give Martin O'Malley more airtime?
You know, it's a great question. I mean, these lesser-known candidates really have to gain some attention early on, or the media isn't interested. I mean, that's in part because voters want to see the candidates they know. I mean, it makes for better television. You always saw them kind of reluctantly give time to these unknown candidates, and they have to make a big splash. And in this election, it's been tough to make a big splash with these outsized personalities like Sanders and Trump.
Levani, let me ask you, this is a question from Sam in Manoa. How might the Democratic nominee react if Trump is a Republican nominee? What's the buzz about that among Democrats? Is it sort of like...
You know, I just don't know who can take Trump seriously. I think that having a nominee who is a real estate developer to possibly lead our country with foreign policy issues, with social welfare issues.
And a former lifelong Democrat.
Very
That's right.
Scary,
Right.
Very scary. So, you know, I feel like it would be a debate, a good debate, probably entertaining. I don't think he's going to get the nomination, but nonetheless, we will be here and we will be going strong and we will construct some very good arguments to debate on issues.
One comment from a viewer, if Trump is elected, will he spread his wealth? Okay.
It's a good question.
Another question I got here among many questions, and I'll start with you on this one, Ethan Oki. Tori from Hilo, which issue is the most important to Hawaii millennials?
Well, it'll be tuition, free tuition. I mean, I know if I had free tuition, I'll go back to school. You know, one of the points that Bernie Sanders had brought up was that undergraduate, a bachelor's degree is the new high school degree. You know, everyone has it. And if they don't, well, they don't want to be in college anyway. They're in construction or they're in some type of blue collar work, which is great. But at the same time, it's like, I cannot afford to work and go to graduate level. But if there's free tuition, or if I had health care until age 26, you could really organize your time to go back to school.
May I just add to that?
Sure.
I think also job creation is very important for millennials. I know locally in Hawaii, a lot of times we have students who leave Hawaii, they're keikioka-aina, they're from here, they leave and they find that, you know, living on the mainland is a lot more affordable, and so trying to retain them and create job opportunities in fields like the environment or renewable energies or technology or startups, trying to do that here locally is really important so that we don't have that brain drain. We definitely want our young people to stay local and be able to afford living here as well.
And if I could just jump in on that, I mean, one thing that's unique about millennials is, I mean, and many of them are children of the recession, they're much less skeptical of the government and the ability of the government to do good than older generations. So there's a lot of Sanders' message that resonates. They don't find redistributive policies scary. They don't necessarily find a bigger government scary.
Charles, as you, I have to let you take a swat at that.
Well, you know, there's a saying, if you think education is really expensive, try it when it's free. I think that it's easy to talk about giving things away. It's easy to talk, make education free. Let's make healthcare free. Heck, let's make everything free. And then what happens is you get Greece. And you know what Greece was doing a decade ago was nice. They were living on the high.
You mean the country Greece? I thought
the country of Greece.
Greece.
The country of Greece, yes.
Sorry.
But after spending all of their money, racking up huge amounts of debt, their country is now in an economic tailspin. And the people who are suffering the most are the young people in that nation. And I don't want America to go down that same path. And I think the people here in Hawaii, especially young people, are frustrated living in an economy with extraordinarily high taxes, smallest and lowest small business job growth, smallest small business creation in the country, very, very little job growth and very little opportunities. And that's why I think we need to see a more dynamic political system here in Hawaii as well as the country.
Okay, I only got time for two more questions. One is, goes to Hillary Clinton's sort of problem. Everyone thought all the women would vote for her, and she's got a big problem there. Colin, let me try that first. I don't want to dump that one right on Levani right away.
I have to respond to that.
I will absolutely let
Quickly
you.
if you can.
Well, I mean, there's a younger generation of women who don't feel that way. And I mean, you saw the controversy over Gloria Steinem's comments on television and Madeleine Albright's comments that there's a special place in hell for women who don't support women. And you saw this referenced in the debate. So I think she's trying to balance that. I mean, there's an older generation, perhaps of more committed feminists, and that message doesn't resonate with younger women.
So I'm going to just say that I think this is the media sensationalizing. I think this is not about gender. And in fact, Hillary did say that, you know, this election, when you vote for her as president, possibly, you are voting for families. This is not about the fact that she's a woman and you're going to vote her in because she might be the first woman president. She is concerned about doing the right thing by our families. And so we should not default to gender. She will advocate for women's rights. She will advocate for paid family leave and equal pay. But to create something around gender is really, I think it's more of media play and airtime.
A little bit, Chris, I only have like 10 seconds for an answer on this. Do you think that there is more about younger women like her policy, like Bernie's policy is better than Hillary, that's why they're not voting as much for her?
Yeah, specifically policy.
Okay, I've got one last question now, and everybody gets like 5 seconds each. And I need you to be completely objective about this. Who won the debate? Colin?
Look, I think Bernie won the debate. I think he was weak on foreign policy, which we didn't have a chance to talk about, but the issues the Democratic primary electorate cares about, inequality, he hit it hard.
Ethan?
Hard to say. I've seen both positives.
Okay,
I think they both did well.
one word.
Hillary was a better debater. Bernie won the debate because he had a better message.
Okay, thank you all very much. It's been a really fun show. The PBS NewsHour Democratic presidential primary debate was aired live in its entirety on PBS Hawaii from 4 to 6 p.m. today. If you missed it, you'll have a chance to see it immediately following this show at 9 o'clock. And if you wonder when PBS NewsHour will bring you a Republican presidential debate, we're hoping it will be soon. NewsHour offered debate forums to both parties, and we're told there's no word back yet from the Republican National Committee. Now, next week on Insights, what is life like for Hawaii's nearly 5,000 Muslims? They come from 42 different countries and are of different races and cultures. Many of these Muslim faithful are American-born citizens. Join the conversation about life as a Muslim in Hawaii. That's next time on Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Daryl Huff. Ahui ho.